The ocean is a vast and mysterious place, with only a fraction fully explored by scientists. Naturally, this leads to some bizarre and unexpected finds. From a sprawling octopus nursery to rubber ducks floating far from shore, here are 20 of the creepiest things discovered in the ocean. Number 20. A turtle graveyard. We already know that the ocean is a mysterious place, but whenever we find something in there, we can generally come up with an explanation. So far, researchers are still a little unsure about why there's a massive turtle graveyard underneath the island of Borneo. We're not just talking about 1 or 2 turtle skeletons. We're talking about dozens of turtle fossils buried in a graveyard beneath the waves in Sabah, Malaysia. They are located inside a network of underwater caves about 60 feet below the ocean surface and 200 feet under the island's landmass. Not only are there full-grown turtle shells, but also the remains of stillborn turtles. Oh, it's all very bizarre. So bizarre that most researchers still don't know how the many dozens of shells got there. Sea turtles don't typically congregate to die. Mass drowning isn't likely because they can hold their breaths for many hours. They are also expert navigators, so getting lost while migrating wasn't seen as a possibility either. And there's the fact that babies were found in the graveyard when sea turtles hatch on the sand. There are definitely more questions than answers. Number 19. Atlantis. We talk about some of the weirdest discoveries, but there's something we all seem to know about but are yet to discover. If we did discover it, it would be quite weird. We're talking about Atlantis. About 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote about a civilization that sank into the sea about 12,000 years ago. It was called the continent of Atlantis, and many scientists have spent decades looking for it without any luck. When the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution was founded in 1931, the founding director and oceanographer Henry Bryan Bigelow and 2 others set off on a 42-day-long exploration adventure around the Azores, investigating how large currents powered North America's climate. While there, they searched the seafloor looking for signs of Atlantis. Until that point, we only had one clue as to its existence, an island in front of the straits called the Pillars of Hercules. Spoiler alert, they didn't find anything. Over the years, countless people have set out to find Atlantis, but there remains no conclusive evidence that it ever existed. Now it's time for today's topic. A group of fishers couldn't believe their eyes when they saw what was happening 6 miles ashore. They had been casually cruising around the water in 3 boats, hoping to bag a few fish, when they stumbled across a group of people on a small sandy bank in the water. At first, they didn't know what they were doing, but then they realized they were playing a game of volleyball. Why would you think you'd be 6 miles offshore playing a game of volleyball? What would you do if you found a sandy area so far away from civilization? Comment down below and let us know your opinion in relation to what we just showed on screen. With that being said, let's keep things moving. Number 18. The Silfra fissure. Diving between 2 continents might seem like an impossible undertaking. You'd have to be physically fit because the ocean is absolutely massive, but as it turns out, it's much easier than you think. You just have to visit the Silfra fissure. In Iceland, it's the only place in the world where you can dive between 2 continents. The fissure is located in Thingvellir National Park. It was way better. Whether Eurasian and North American tectonic plates have been moving apart by about 0.78 inches each year. The Silfra fissure is one of many that opened up after a significant earthquake in the area in 1789. However, the Silfra fissure was the only one to fill up with glacial meltwater from the Langjökull glacier nearby. Visiting this fissure and exploring it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. There are 4 sections to explore: the Deep Silfra Crack, Silfra Hall, Silfra Cathedral, and Silfra Lagoon. Each has its own unique and majestic features like rock formations, blue water, and exceptional underwater visibility. If you visit the Deep Silfra Crack, you can also get your photo taken between the 2 continents. If you are looking to go diving in one of the best diving sites in the world, the Silfra fissure would be on your list. In fact, the Professional Association of Diving Instructors ranks it as one of the top 10. Number 17. A locomotive graveyard. You expect to encounter shipwrecks in the ocean, but how confused would you be to discover a train? It's not like we have underground railways. In 1985, Paul Helper was using a magnetometer to map the bottom of the ocean off the coast of New Jersey when he discovered 2 massive metal objects. He had no idea what they were because the water was dirty, so he returned later to find out more. He was shocked to realize they were locomotives and had been there since around the 1850s. After further investigation, Paul discovered they were rare Planet-class 222T locomotives produced for a short time. They were practically obsolete as soon as they were made. These 15-ton locomotives were self-contained and made for power rather than size, and that was half the problem. They were far too small when comparable locomotives weighed about 35 tons each. While they were clearly undesirable trains, No one knows how they came to be sunk in the ocean. There were no records about them being built, which means there were no records about them being lost or sunk. Experts believe the locomotives were perhaps being transported from Boston to the mid-Atlantic on a vessel when they encountered a storm. The engines might have then fallen off or had been purposely pushed off to stop the ship from sinking in rough seas. Number 16. The largest octopus nursery. The small deep-sea octopus called Myscophus robustus is rarely captured on film. Whenever our researcher sees one, they're delighted. So you can imagine how excited a deep-sea explorer crew was when they saw hundreds of them 2 miles below the Pacific Ocean surface. It is now being described as the largest deep-sea octopus nursery. The incredible discovery was made at Davidson Seamount on the eastern flank of a small hill. They started seeing pockets of dozens of octopuses, and the crew believed there were more than 1,000 in this area alone. Most of the octopuses were in a brooding position, which is where the females turned their bodies inside out to protect their eggs. Not only was this a first for the west coast of the United States, but the entire world. Chicago Field Museum marine biologist Janet Voigt said she thought that seeing one nursery previously was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but seeing videos of another larger one makes her think there are more places like this than they thought. Scientists aren't entirely sure why they chose the area around Davidson Seamount to create their giant nursery, but they believe heat might play a part in their choice. While they don't have temperature probes at the time to compare, they saw a shimmer in the water that might indicate warm water in the area. Number 15. The Ice Finger of Doom. We all know the ocean is deadly, but that's because some terrifying creatures lurk within it, like sharks. But who knew that the water in the ocean could also be deadly? We're not just talking about the risk of drowning, we're talking about ice fingers, also known as brinicles. They are finger-like structures that grow down from the floating sea ice into Antarctic waters. We've known about them since the 1960s, but only recently did we observe them being made in real time. The barnacles only form in polar regions under floating sea ice blocks. When ice freezes in the ocean, the water removes most of the salt, producing a pure ice crystal. The excess salt needs lower temperatures to freeze, so it stays liquid and creates a high salinity brine channel within the ice block. Barnacles will form when that floating sea ice cracks and the saline leaks into the ocean below. Brine is heavier than the surrounding water, so it sinks towards the ocean floor, freezing any fresh water it comes into contact with. This process allows the barnacle to grow downward. Once it reaches the seafloor, it can freeze sea creatures it encounters like starfish and sea urchins. Number 14. Faceless fish. A fish like the one discovered off the coast of Australia in 2017 makes me not want to dip a single toe in the ocean. Scientists were exploring the depths of the water around Australia when they first found a brownish-white fish that didn't have anything resembling gills. That wasn't even the worst part. It also didn't have eyes or anything that looked like a face. The fish was felt in the Jervis Bay Commonwealth Marine Reserve around 13,000 feet below the ocean surface. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. Its body was smooth and featureless, almost like a creature out of a science fiction movie, and it moved silently through the inky darkness of the deep sea. The lack of facial features gave it an eerie appearance, making it look like something straight out of a nightmare. Tissue samples and images were sent to experts to see if it was a new species, but then eel expert Chong Paganowski stepped in. He examined the fish while on the vessel and burst their bubble. It wasn't a new fish species. It was a cuspeel, which scientists called the faceless cusk. But it was still an exciting discovery because they hadn't been seen in the area for more than 100 years. Its rediscovery gave scientists a rare glimpse into the mysterious creatures that inhabit the deep ocean, reminding us of how little we truly know about what lurks in the dark depths of our planet. Number 13. The Bimini Road. In 1968, subsea archaeologists were understandably shocked when they discovered a road 20 feet below the water surface in the Bahamas, off the North Bimini coast. It was a 1,500-foot-long cobbled road featuring large angular beach rock, with each piece measuring about 13 feet long. As you might be aware, we don't walk under the water or drive our cars under the water, so a road deep in the ocean seemed a bit unnecessary. Upon further investigation, the subsea archaeologists discovered that the blocks lay in an orderly row and perhaps looked as if they once had right-angled corners. Over time, these had been smoothed by erosion. The archaeologists speculated that the pavements might have formed part of a lost civilization, Atlantis. Perhaps. Bimini Road remains quite a popular attraction today, but it's not believed to be the remains of a lost civilization. Instead, experts think that it's entirely natural. It is believed that the beach rock might have been one large rock sheet and was broken into shards over time to create that cobbled appearance. When the University of Miami's Department of Geology assessed the rock samples through radiocarbon dating, they said the Bimini Road rocks were about 2,000 years old. This definitely puts to bed the theory that it was a road in Atlantis, since that supposedly sank about 12,000 years ago, if it existed after all, of course. Number 12. Cenote Angelita. The Cenote Angelita looks like any regular swimming hole. For the most part, it is beautiful, with its turquoise water and abundance of flora surrounding it. There's more to Angelita in Yucatan, Mexico, than meets the eye. One photographer and Natalie Beloshin visited Angelita to go diving and take photos. They discovered something incredible. Nearly 100 feet within the cenote is an underwater river. It seems impossible. You surely can't have a swimming hole and a river underneath it, but you can. First, we need to understand what cenotes are and how they form. Cenotes are sinkholes that form when limestone bedrock collapses, exposing groundwater underneath. More often than not, the cenotes have complex underwater caves linked to underground bodies of water. As time passes, the sinkholes fill with fresh rainwater, which is obviously different from the salty groundwater. Underwater rivers can form when the fresh rainwater meets the salty groundwater. As the two water types have different densities, they form layers and create two different habitats. You can easily see where the waters meet because there's a milky effect called a halocline. Number 11. Rubber ducks. Rubber ducks belong in bathtubs, and that doesn't mean they stayed there for more than a decade. Rubber ducks have been randomly discovered on shores around the world, but that doesn't mean the rubber ducks have escaped their bathtubs in search of bigger bodies of water. These ducks, in particular, never made it to the bathtubs of children in the first place. In 1992, a cargo ship had a whoopsie in the North Pacific and dumped 28,000 rubber ducks and other bath toys into the ocean. They were on their way to the United States from China and had slowly been reaching their destination as the years went by. Over the years, there were reports about them reaching Maine and shores around the Atlantic, but where else would 28,000 bright yellow ducks end up? Well, a journalist with clearly not much else better to do decided to track them, and he wrote a book about them. 13 years after the ducks ended up in the ocean, Donovan Holmes started tracking their movements from his own home. He read accounts on ocean currents and our 6 geometry, interviewing oceanographers and talking to beachcombers. His research led him to track the ducks from Seattle to Alaska onto Hawaii, and then all the way to China at the Arctic. You can now read about the duck's incredible journey in his book with a very long name, Moby Duck, the true story of 2,800 bath toys lost at sea and of the beachcombers, oceanographers, environmentalists, and fools, including the author who went in search of them. Number 10. Manganese nodules. Seeing giant metal balls in the ocean would make you think that a ship dropped to contain a load of payload tank sets, but can you believe it's a natural thing? In saying that, researchers were still shocked when they saw huge metal balls rather than softballs. Hundreds of miles east of Barbados, a German research ship called RV Son was looking for deep-sea creatures between South America and Africa. It was using a mesh net to capture them, but instead of bringing up marine life, the nets brought up huge balls of manganese. All using a remote camera, they realized that particular area had hundreds of round manganese nodules, some of which were bowling ball-sized. According to the chief scientist for the mission, Colin Devey, the discovery was surprising because it was not an area they thought would have manganese nodules. The shapes were also interesting since most manganese nodules are pancake-like rather than round. Scientists think that these nodules, plus all others that have been found, grow slowly and form layers of metal or that crystallize around a core. They layer themselves by less than an inch per million years, which means that some of the ones the scientists found might be more than 10 million years old. Number 9. Sea spiders. As if land spiders aren't terrifying enough, we also have sea spiders that continue to baffle scientists. Sea spiders are weird-looking critters that scientists haven't been able to classify definitively. The spiders crawl along the seafloor up to 22,965 feet below the ocean surface and live in the dark. Here, they feed on sea slugs and slow-moving, soft-bodied sponges. So far, scientists have at least been able to conclude that sea spiders have weird features. For example, some have a straw-like proboscis they insert into other animals and suck out their juices. The Antarctic sea spider also has an extra body segment compared to other spiders, meaning it has 5 pairs of legs rather than 4. Some also have incredibly long lengths, spanning up to 27.5 inches. But those spiders aren't even the worst of it. In the past 250 years or so, biologists have also discovered a diving bell spider that uses its web as a gill. The spider will use the fine hairs on its abdomen to grab a bubble of air from the water's surface. It will then trap the air on its own silken web and carry it around the water like an aqua lung. For decades, biologists were baffled as to how they could remain under the water without visiting the surface for air that much. And now they know they have their own little oxygen tanks. Number 8. Apollo 11 engines. We're always told to take our rubbish with us whenever we leave a public place, but NASA clearly doesn't abide by the same rules. It took Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos to do it for them. Researchers led by Jeff recovered sunken treasure in the Atlantic Ocean, 14,000 feet in water off the coast of Florida. But it wasn't a treasure chest. It was parts of two F-1 rocket engines. Before long, Jeff verified that those engine components came from Apollo 11, the first mission taking the United States astronauts to the moon, and the timing couldn't have been better. According to Jeff, the announcement came on the anniversary of the 1969 moon landing. Jeff wrote the following on his blog: 44 years ago tomorrow, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, and now we have recovered a critical technological marvel that made it all possible. But it wasn't Jeff himself who reached a conclusion about the rocket engines they had found. It was his conservation team from the Canvas Cosmosphere and Space Center in Hutchinson, Kansas. One of the conservators saw 2044 stenciled on the side of one of the thrust chambers. This number corresponded with the serial number for the F-1 engine of the Apollo 11 mission. But how did they end up in the ocean? 5 engines, weighing 9 tons each, formed a cluster to power the largest rocket in history and guided it 38 miles above Earth in under 3 minutes. After the engines separated, they re-entered the Earth at 5,000 miles an hour and plummeted into the ocean. Number 7. Lokiarchaeota microorganisms. Who would have thought that discovering microorganisms in some water would be such a huge deal? But scientists were excited when microorganisms called Lokiarchaeota were found beneath the Atlantic Ocean between Greenland and Norway. They said they were the missing link between the simple cells that first populated the Earth and the complex cellular life that came about 2 billion years ago. The microorganisms were found on a seabed about 1.5 miles below the ocean surface, near a hydrothermal vent system called Loki's Castle. The discovery meant that scientists could learn how small and simple microbes evolved into the building blocks for plants, animals, fungi, and people. The scientists described the Lokiarchaeota as simple cells without internal structures, but they shared with eukaryotes some genes with functions related to the cell membrane. Basically, they were a starter kit that could support cellular complexity and development. Many of us have always wondered where we've come from, and now we know about our microbial ancestors. According to evolutionary microbiologist Atima, this new microorganism is a missing piece of the evolution puzzle. Our broad diversity today might not have been possible without Lokiarchaeota. Number 6. Moai statue. Moai statues are nothing new. They are heaps of these monolithic human figures carved by the Rapa Nui people on Easter Island. But they are on Easter Island as in dry land. Well, not all of them. There is also one off the southwestern shore of Easter Island. If you're a competent scuba diver, you might be able to see it for yourself. Placed at a depth of 131 feet, the statue is a unique sight, sitting eerily on the ocean floor with its solemn face looking up toward the surface. The surrounding blue waters add an almost mystical quality to the scene, making it feel like you've stumbled upon an ancient underwater world. According to some reports, local island inhabitants placed the Moai statue underwater as a token of gratitude. They wanted to thank older generations for giving them the skills to live off the sea. The statue was also a sign of respect for what lives in the ocean. If you want to see the statue for yourself, you just have to take a 10-minute boat ride from the coast, put on your diving gear, and dive down about 131 feet. Not only will you get to see the statue up close and personal, but you'll probably also catch sight of a few cool marine creatures like turtles and fish. Number 5. Hydrothermal vents. You'd be wrong if you thought only humans could produce toxic fluids and gases. The ocean can do the same thing. Ocean vents are hydrothermal vents sitting over deep fissures in the ocean floor. Generally, these are located around areas of tectonic activity and eject hot fluids and gases into the seawater. Often, these fluids and gases are toxic. Scientists first learned about hydrothermal vents in 1977 whilst learning more about an oceanic spreading ridge near the Galapagos Islands. Not only did they discover the vents, but they also found huge numbers of organisms they have never seen before. It became evident that these organisms relied on the chemical processes from seawater and hot magma interactions to survive. Hydrothermal vents are created when seawater penetrates fissures in the ocean's crust, generally near subduction zones or spreading centers. Hot magma will heat cold seawater, and it reemerges to form the vents. Once heated, In these vents, the seawater can be as hot as 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Shouldn't the water be boiling at this point? Because of the extreme pressure in the dark depths of the ocean, the seawater within the vent doesn't boil, so there's no point in taking ramen down there. Number 4. Barrel-eye fish. Out of all the fish in the ocean, barrel-eye fish would have to be some of the most incredible and unique. They are small, 6-inch long fish with transparent heads and protruding eyes that live more than 2,000 feet below the ocean's surface. These unique fish mostly eat plankton and use their tubular eyes to track down prey when most fish wouldn't even be able to see a thing that deep down in the ocean. What's even more fascinating is that their transparent heads allow them to rotate their eyes upward to spot prey through their own skulls, a feature no other fish has. Their eyes are shielded from the darkness and pressure of the deep sea by a dome-like structure, which helps protect their sensitive vision. While we don't know too much about them, we do know that they have long lifespans. Some experts think that they might live a few hundred years and can go months or years without needing to seek out sustenance. And you might think that infrequent feeding might make them slow and sluggish, but that's not the case. They can swim at speeds of up to 60 miles an hour, outrunning most predators. This is because they have a unique swim bladder that basically gives them jet power in the water. Their streamlined bodies and remarkable adaptations make them one of the ocean's most mysterious and elusive creatures. Number 3. Alien-like creatures. An alien-like creature spotted 3,753 feet down in the Indian Ocean by a remotely operating vehicle is perhaps why most of us stay in the shallows. In fact, it's probably why some people just stick to their own bathtubs. The ROV was operating around the east coast of Africa, where it spotted an unusual creature of attributes we've never seen on other sea creatures before. It kind of looked like a jellyfish or octopus but was jet black in color and had weird features. The creature's long, thin tendrils floated in the water, giving it an eerie, ghost-like appearance as it drifted. It moved gracefully through the water, its movements almost hypnotic, until it suddenly transformed into a little black ball shape, a behavior that left scientists baffled. Adding to its mystery, the creature seemed to glow faintly with bioluminescence, illuminating the deep ocean in an otherworldly light. It also appears to have some kind of bioluminescence. Towards the end of the video, the creature seems to be ripped apart. It's not known if it lived or not, but it got caught up in the outputs of the remote vehicle's thrusters. Number 2. A mysterious purple orb. While researchers might have had to fight a crab for their discovery, it was worth it when they might have discovered some kind of new sea slug. The EV Nautilus team was exploring around 5,000 feet below the ocean surface in a canyon off Southern California's coast when they saw something glowing onto their submersible vehicle lights. It was vibrant purple, so it was easy to spot among the beige hues of the surrounding environment. A crab spotted it at the same time, and the researchers weren't sure that they'd be able to grab the unusual objects before the crab did. As the submarine moved towards the purple orb, one of the crab's legs knocked it, but it remained stuck in place. At this moment, researchers wondered whether it might be a relative of plankton, but they were never going to find out for sure just by looking at it, so they used a vacuum and sucked it into a storage container for further investigation aboard their ship. Once aboard their ship, the purple orb unfolded to reveal a foot and ear-like structures called rhinophores. There was also a type of proboscis on the back. These features helped researchers determine that it was some kind of gastropod. It was likely a sea slug variant, a type of mollusk that crawls around with one foot and forms part of a colored species that swim and dance in the ocean. A sample of the creature was sent to the Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology for DNA analysis, but confirming the purple orb as a new species can generally take months. Number 1. The Titanic wreck. There are plenty of shipwrecks in the ocean, but perhaps few are as recognizable or widely known as the wreck of the Titanic. The Titanic was a British luxury passenger liner that hit an iceberg and sunk in 1912, killing around 1,500 people. Technology was limited in those days, so finding the wreck was going to be a challenge. Real efforts to find it didn't begin until the second half of the 20th century. In 1985, an American-French expedition led by Robert Ballard went aboard a United States Navy research ship and set off on a discovery quest. They used a 16-foot submersive sled with a remote-controlled camera, which could transmit live images to a monitor. The submersive was sent 13,000 feet down to the Atlantic Ocean floor, and the first underwater images were recorded on September 1, 1985. These images showed the Titanic's boilers. Later video footage revealed the ship's lying in two pieces with its damaged stern section and bow. Sadly, it was also revealed at this time that rust-eating stalactites were covering the ship and slowly eating away at it. It might only be a matter of decades until the most notable features of the Titanic are lost. With just a tiny percentage of the ocean discovered so far, it's probably not all that surprising that we're still making weird and wonderful discoveries. Have you ever found anything weird in a body of water? So what was it? Share your story in the comments. Also, check out our other cool stuff showing up on the screen now. We'll see you next time.